Got the Willie McMarking and Mark.
All right, my name is Pepe Willie, P-E-P-E W-I-L-L-I-E. Let me tell you where it all started from. Actually, my uncle, Clarence Collins, founding member of Little Anthony and the Imperials, came to pick up my sister. I was living with my father on Grand Avenue in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And he came to pick up my sister to take to my mother's house because my father and mom were separated, of course. So, and I'd heard his music on the radio. So I looked at him as he went to pick up my sister, and, you know, and I said, oh, wow. I says, you sing with Little Anthony and the Imperials? I was 10 years old then. He was 17. He goes like, yeah, I sing with Little Anthony and the Imperials. You know, he's like some 17-year-old kid. I mean, that's how he spoke to me. And I went like, oh, wow, I was just in shock. You know, my favorite music back then that I remember that really got me hooked on the music was Fats Domino, you know, Blue Monday, I'm Walking, you know, that type of thing. Elvis Presley, I used to imitate Elvis Presley, and for my father's friends, and they used to give me quarters and stuff like that, and I had made my little living and stuff like that. But I found out that my uncle sang with Little Anthony and Imperials, and, you know, I was only 10. So then when 5 years later, fast forward, I'm 15 years old, and I wanted to be with my uncle, right? And they were playing at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater. The Coasters was there, Chubby Checker was there, Little Anthony and the Imperials was there, and some other groups I can't remember. But I was going, getting food and stuff for Little Anthony and the Imperials because, you know, this is my first time at a rock and roll show, period. And so my uncle had said to me he said, Pepe, he says, why don't you go knock on some of these other stars' doors and see if they want something from the store. And I went like, oh, okay. So I go up to the next floor and I see Chubby Checker's name on his door, and I knock on his door, and he's going like, yeah. And I says, you want something from the store? And he goes like, yeah, come on in. And I open the door, and there's Chubby Checker, man, you know, Mr. Twist, man, you know. And he gave me some money and says, go get me a pack of Salem cigarettes. I went like, oh, okay, you know, then you can go get cigarettes, you know. So, yeah. And I came out the backstage door, and they had a police line there, and all these kids and stuff was behind the, you know, the police line, the barricades and stuff, and every time the door would open, they would scream because they would think some star would come out. And I opened the door to come out, and they're going like, ah! And they stop, and they go like, oh, man, this guy, you know. And I'd walk, and I'd go get Chubby Checker cigarettes. I knew nothing about crowds. I knew nothing about fans. I knew nothing about any of that stuff. So now I come back with Chubby Checker cigarettes. And I knock on the stage door for the guard to let me in. And somebody on the police line, one of the fans had said in the crowd, hey, how come he can get in and get out? And, you know, how come he can go back and forth and go inside and stuff? And I just blurted out, I said, well, I just went to get Chubby Checker these cigarettes. And I don't know why I just said that. It was normal to me. And the barricade broke down. These kids just came at me, and they were trying to get to these cigarettes. You know, I had no idea what fans were and everything. They grabbed my shirt, they ripped it apart. The guard had to pull me in the door, you know, and I'm in that now. I got to give Chubby Checker his cigarettes. He says, keep the change and all this. But I have my shirt was all ripped and everything like that. And that was the first time that I knew about fans and you know, that type of thing and stuff. So we seen the show, and I got my experience doing that rock and roll type of thing, and I liked it. That was my first experience. And then that next year, there was Murray Decay. Murray Decay, 1010 Wins New York, his radio show, and he was the DJ. And he started doing these holiday shows for Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving. And that's when the kids would have 10 days off from school. And they had all the rock stars were there. I mean, Patti LaBelle and the Bluebells, the Chiffons, the Shirelles, Marvin Gaye, the Four Tops, the Temptations, the original Temptations with Eddie Kendricks and David Ruffin, and Martha and the Vandellas. I mean, just everybody. Dionne Warwick, everybody was there. Wayne Newton, the Ronettes and stuff. And I already, acclimated myself, and I was just knocking on their doors, going like, anybody want anything from the store? And they go like, yeah. I go and Ray Charles, his guys would give me money, go get Ray Charles this, and Marvin Gaye, yeah, go get me this, and the Supremes, and that was my hustle. That's how I made money. I was like 16 then, always had $100 in my pocket, baby. That's how it was, And so that's how it all started for me. And, the only thing that I really loved about that was that I was in this entertainment world and everybody got along. There was no fighting, there was no arguing. Every artist respected each other. The Imperials told me, go upstairs to the Four Tops room and find out what color uniforms they wearing. And I go, okay. And I go to the Tops room, I knock on the door, and one of the Four Tops come in. Yeah, what's up? The Imperials want to know what color you guys are wearing. We're going to wear black today. And we go like, on this show. I go, okay. So, and I go back down to the Imperials dressing room, and I said, well, the Tops are going to wear black, guys. And then one of the Imperials will go like, oh, good, man, we're going to kill them with the red. And that was the only competition that there was, and, to outdo each other on stage. That was it. And Little Anthony and the Imperials, these guys were so great. I mean, they danced, they did splits and everything like that. And none of these other bands or groups did that. They was doing, splits all over the place and, each one of these guys. And I was just so amazed. And then at the end of the show, backstage, everybody was singing gospel songs. They came out in the hallway, and they were just singing gospel songs, black, white. And I'm going like, how do they know these songs? Because I'm from Brooklyn, and these other people from Detroit, they're from Alabama or Birmingham, or wherever they're from. How do they know these songs and stuff? Everybody was singing gospel songs. And I looked at that and I said, this is what I want to do. Because I'm from the hood. I'm from, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn and stuff, And I love the fact that everybody got along, that everybody respected one another and stuff. And this was the world that I wanted to live in. And that's where I started. And I said, I got to get into this music game because this is what I want to do. So I started playing drums. I was a drummer. Started playing drums. And in school, and junior high school, of course. And then, of course, I got kicked out of music school. I don't know how that happened. I was just messing around one day before the teacher came in, and we're playing all kind of drum stuff, and the teacher comes in and says, okay, Willie, get out of here. You're out. You're done. I had to go to art class then. I don't know nothing about no art, painting and all this type of stuff. But that was my first introduction into music and playing an instrument. And I started writing lyrics. I just started writing lyrics in a notebook. I didn't know any melodies or anything like that. It was just words, in a book, and I'm just writing the stuff down. I had a whole notebook full of lyrics and stuff, But my uncle and Anthony and the rest of the Imperials, they were my fathers, so to speak, and they taught me so much about this business. I couldn't say nothing. I had to shut up. They said, Pepe, you shut up and you listen, keep your ears open and your mouth shut. And I was going to lunches, I was going to dinners and stuff with the Miracles, the Tops, the Temptations, and all these guys sitting around eating dinner and stuff, and I'm there like this and eating and stuff, just listening to everything and soaking everything in, just soaking it in, man. And I was hooked. I was just hooked on the music at that time. And that's how it started for me, you know, to get into this business. I know I was in Brooklyn. I was living with my grandmother in South Brooklyn at the time when Martin Luther King got assassinated. And it was I didn't understand that. Before that, I think Kennedy had got shot. And I really didn't understand that at all. I didn't understand that because here is the president of the United States of America, and they assassinated him. And I'm coming home from school, and everybody said, the president's dead. He got shot in the head, you know. And I'm going like, what are these guys talking about? And I'm walking past candy stores and everything like that, and I see the newspaper front page, you know, Kennedy's shot and everything, killed. And what I was thinking at that time was, you know, if they killed the president of the United States, and I'm a black kid from the hood, what did that mean for me? You know, where did I come? How did I matter in this? You know, and it was just unbelievable. And when Martin Luther King got assassinated, and he was trying so hard to bring everybody together, and then he gets assassinated, and I thought that there was no hope. You know, he gave us hope in his speeches and the things that he said. But when he got killed, assassinated, shot down, it was like, where do we go from here? What do we do? What can I do? Now, you know, in my neighborhood, there was, you know, a lot of brothers and sisters who, they couldn't handle it. So they went out and they rioted, and they were just so overwhelmed with anger and stuff, and they broke windows, they robbed stores, they burnt down places and stuff like that. And, you know, and for me, it was like I was there. I was there. I wanted to go out and I wanted to burn shit. I wanted to beat up the first white person I seen. I mean, that's how I felt. But intellect came in, you know, and it says, Pepe, you can't do that, man. You have to learn. You have to keep this in your brain and learn. Don't burn. You have to learn, man. And my heart went out to all the other brothers and sisters because they got to where everybody went. Everybody got to that point where they want to go, oh, man, I'm going to go out here. I'm going to hurt somebody. I'm pissed. I'm doing this type of stuff. And they stopped right there. So they went out and they was rioting and they was doing their thing and they was burning and breaking and stealing and doing whatever they could to show their anger, their frustration. But they couldn't go any higher. They couldn't learn. They couldn't, there was no outlet for them. You know, that was the only outlet they had. But for me, I wanted to go out there. I wanted to be out there. But then, you know, intellect came into my brain, and I says, no, that's not the right way. You know, I said, Pepe, you know, you can write about that type of stuff. You know, and you know, but I still felt useless. I felt that I wasn't worth anything. You know, and then Robert Kennedy. You know, so you got John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy, and I didn't know what to think of America at that point. I really didn't. But music was my salvation. That's what brought me back. Music was always there, and I knew that music would always be there for me. Yeah, music did change because then you had the hippie movement. You know, it was love, free love, and you know, there was white groups, rock and roll groups that were doing good music and going against all of the atrocities that the minorities were going through. You know, I can't remember specifically the group or groups or whatever, but I listened to a lot of music at that point. Three Dog Night, Iron Butterfly, Bob Dylan, and it took on a new meaning of original rock and roll because we were singing about love and rock and roll, you know. And now it was more of people and feelings of what people were going through in their lives and stuff, you know. There was some protest music, but I think that my thing was freedom of the mind. I wrote this song called "My Mind Is Open," and it was like, look at life's reality in your mind, you'll be free. You know, these are the type of things I was doing. And then little Anthony and my uncle Clarence Collins had produced that. You know, I finally made it as a songwriter. I wrote this song called "My Mind Is Open," and I'm all right. My mind is open and it's out of sight. Look at life's reality, so plain to see. Look at life's reality, so plain to see. And they had this group called the Blues Busters. And Anthony and Clarence together produced that group. It was two guys like Sam and Dave and stuff, but they were the Blues Busters. And they did my song, you know, "My Mind Is Open." And these are the type of things that I was writing, you know. It wasn't no more like, "Baby, I love you," or "I lost you on the highway," or, you know, whatever. It was the freedom of the mind and how to think, how to survive, you know, what can you do in order to make it better for you and the people that were around you, you know, trying to teach people, trying to let people know, no, don't go out and riot and stuff, you know, think about your family, think about your friends, think about all the positive things in life. That's what I was thinking about, thinking of the positive things in life. I was listening at that time when I got out of the service in 1970. Of course, I was drafted. I didn't like the fact that I had to go into some army or military and fight in Vietnam, whereas I didn't even know the reason why. All I know is that, you know, my friends who were drafted also went into the service, and they'd go to basic training, they'd come home for 30 days, they went back, had 9 weeks or 8 weeks of jungle training, and then they were dead. That's all, you know, that I knew. And I really was against the Vietnam conflict because I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand it. I was writing good songs at that time. I met Muhammad Ali at Harlequin's rehearsal studios where my uncle and the Orianthi Imperials were rehearsing. And I met Muhammad Ali in the elevator. And he was saying that he was doing an album. He was doing a record. And I told him, I said, well, you know, I'm a songwriter and stuff, you know. And he goes like, wow, yeah, kid, you know, whatever. That was good. And we exchanged information. And I was going to write with Muhammad Ali, you know. And also the Shy Lights, you know, "Oh girl, be in trouble if you leave me now," you know, those guys, the Shy Lights. I was writing songs for them because my girlfriend's cousin was dating Marshall from the Shy Lights out here in Chicago, and they were in New York and stuff like that. But the music that I was listening to was Jimi Hendrix, The Association, like I said earlier, the Three Dog Night, Iron Butterfly, Crosby, Stills and Nash. Of course, the Motown sound, you know, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Supremes, Four Tops. I also listened to Frank Sinatra. I also was listening to a lot of jazz, like Horace Silver, Dave Brubeck, Thelonious Monk, those guys. So I was well-rounded in music. I just loved music. I used to come home from school and put on albums upon albums and albums of just jazz albums and stuff, and just listen to that. And then when I went out on dates with girls and stuff, I would never really listen to R&B music, because my uncle was on tour, and he would lend me his apartment at Ebbets Field's apartment, and I would always play Frank Sinatra or the Mystic Moods Orchestra. The Mystic Moods Orchestra was good because they had songs. It was just music. It was no singing, and they had sound effects like lightning and rain, and and when you have these girls in the apartment, and you got this record on, and they hearing rain, so they be thinking it's raining outside, you would keep them there. They would stay. But, I wanted to show that I just wasn't into just R&B music. I wanted a wide range of music at that time. Oh, Minneapolis. Okay, first of all, I can't remember the year that my uncle's group first started at the Copacabana. They, Jewel Podell's famous Copacabana Club in New York. And I met Ike and Tina Turner there. I drank champagne with Adam Clayton Powell, the senator and stuff. And so many artists was coming by congratulating them, for being at the Copa, because that was a real prestige gig. So, and I'm working for Little Anthony and the Imperials. And Sammy from the Imperials, he comes into the dressing room. I'm hanging up the uniforms and stuff, and I'm giving him a towel so he can dry off coming off the stage. And he comes in the dressing room, and he goes like, "Hey, man," he says, "Pepe," he says, "who's that girl out there with the green eyes?" I said, "Girl with the green eyes?" I said, "Oh, yeah." I said, "That's my old lady, man," because I didn't want him messing with her. I never seen her. I never met her. I didn't know what she looked like. But if Sammy was looking at her, I knew that she had to be good looking. And these guys were getting all the girls. I mean, matter of fact, Barry Gordy, when we was doing the shows at the Brooklyn Fox, had told the Supremes, stay away from them Imperials. Because these guys were dangerous, man, with the women. Because, they were from New York. We were sophisticated. They knew how to party. They knew how to treat women. And all the girls gravitated toward them. Priscilla Presley was hanging out with these guys and stuff. I mean, Barry Gordy had to come and get Diana Ross because she was hanging. He came and got her, and dragged her off and stuff like that. But so Sammy here says, "Who's the girl with the green eyes?" And I said, "That's my old lady." So I hung up his uniform and stuff, and I going like, "Quick, Pepe, man, you got to go out there and you got to find this girl." So I run out there in the waiting room, and it's all these girls, of course. I'm looking and stuff. What girl got green eyes, man? And then I see her, and I go like, "Oh, man, yeah, she's pretty nice looking." So I go over to her, and I sit down, and I go like, "Hi, my name is Pepe. What's your name?" She says, "Oh, my name is Chantelle." And I says, "Hi, Chantelle." I says, "So who are you here with? You here with anybody?" And she goes, "Well, I'm from Minneapolis, and I come to visit my aunt." I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Who's your aunt?" "My aunt Kalua." "Your aunt Kalua?" I said, "I know Kalua." I said, "Kalua's dating my uncle, I says, "Do you have any curfews? Can you hang out?" She goes like, "Oh, no, I ain't got no curfew. I can hang out and stuff." I said, "Okay, me and you gonna hang out later." She goes like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that's how it all started. Then I went back in the dressing room, and the rest of the guys come in, and I hang up their stuff. And the end of the show, my uncle Kalua was there. She comes, and then I go with Chantelle, and we hang out. We went to parties or go out to dinner and stuff, or go to Kalua's house and sit down and talk. And little to be as known that Chantelle was Prince's first cousin. And to me, see, that's a godsend. That's a godsend right there, because who would have known? If I would have said, "I don't know who that girl is with the green eyes, I don't know," and he would have went out there and dated her or something like that or whatever, it would have never happened. And that's why I say to people, I said, if it wasn't for Little Anthony and the Imperials, this whole Minneapolis Sound would have took on a different look. It might not even had happened, you know. And so I dated Chantelle. We fell in love, and she was my girl, you know. I go in the service. I come back out. I'm with my girl Chantelle here in Minneapolis. I see Prince playing wrestling. I guess he was wrestling with Charles, his cousin Charles, Chaz they call him. But I didn't pay him no mind, you know. I was just, with my girl. But I had to get back to New York because I worked for the New York Telephone Company at that time as a cable splicer. So, and after you get out of service, you got 90 days to go back to your job that you had before you went into service, or you would lose that job. So I stayed here. I think it was a week before I had to get back. I stayed here as long as I possibly could. Went back to New York and continued my job with the New York Telephone Company. And Chantelle would visit, you know, her aunt in New York and in Manhattan. And we'd hang out, and it was us together always. When you seen me, you seen her. You seen her, you seen me. And a few years later after that, I asked her to marry me and stuff. And we got married in Brooklyn, South Brooklyn. And then came here to Minneapolis in 1974. Prince had called me up in New York when he was 15, because Chantelle was telling him, you know, you better talk to Pepe because he knows about the music industry. He knows about it and everything. So Prince used to call me and ask me about publishing. So what's this thing about publishing, he would say. And I was going like, well, I could explain it to you over the phone, but I'm coming to Minneapolis, so I can tell you better face to face. And he says, okay. So I come to Minneapolis. Prince is 16 now, and he's with this band, Grand Central. My father-in-law had a ski party, Eddie Mandeville, and Grand Central was the band that was playing. And you know, what was funny is the fact that they thought that some big-time producer was going to come and see these guys, and it was me. I didn't know I was the big-time producer, you know. I didn't even know. I was, you know, I don't even think I was even producing at that time. I was just a songwriter. And so I come into the ski party, and Grand Central was playing, and they're playing, and then Morris Day was the drummer at the time, and Andre Simone was playing, Andre Anderson at then was playing bass, Linda, his sister, was playing keyboards, William Dowdy was playing percussion, and Morris Day's mom, LaVon, was their manager. So after they start playing and stuff, and then I'm listening to them playing cover stuff like Earth, Wind and Fire and all this, and they stop playing, you know, taking a break, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm going like, well, you know, what am I supposed to do? So I just played it by ear. I walked over to their manager, and it was like she was just waiting for me to say something, and I sat down at the table, and I said, hi, LaVon, you know. She said, hi. I said, you know, I really like this group, and I really would like to work with them, you know. And she goes like, okay, great. We'll set up some rehearsals, and you can, you know, start working with the band. And I was in, you know. I didn't, you know, really know, you know, that much about production and stuff, but I knew about the business of music. I knew about bands. I knew how they supposed to be, you know, how together they supposed to be on time and everything. And then we started rehearsals at Morris' mom's house up in the attic. And to make a long story longer, I had them put down their instruments. I had them write the lyrics on the blackboard. I had them learn construction of music, because Prince had this one song called Sex Machine. Andre had this song called You Remind Me of Me. And when they played it, I said, okay, let me hear it. And they play it, and it lasts for like 15 minutes. And I was going like, no. I said, this can't happen. I said, look, you got to use this formula. And I gave them this formula, how to write songs for radio. And if you use this formula, I said to them, all your songs will be at least 3 minutes, 30 seconds, and that's all the time that's allotted for radio. They're not going to give you much more time than that. And Prince was playing guitar, you know. And so one rehearsal, Christy Lazenberry from 94 East, she was there with me, and Prince went over to Linda and says, you know, the keyboard player, and says, I want you to play this. And I'm watching him taking off his guitar, goes over to the keyboard, and he starts, this is what I want you to play, Linda. And I'm looking at him, going like, okay. This guy plays keyboards. Huh. He goes back to his guitar and he starts playing. They're doing this song. Then he takes off his guitar again, and he goes to Andre, let me hold your bass. Andre gives him bass and stuff, and Prince just, and I'm going like, I said, wait a minute, this guy plays bass and keyboards and guitar? I'm like, wow, man. I said, okay. And so I asked him right then and there, I said, because I talked to these guys about studio work, how radio pays you, how you make money in this business, you know, as a recording session, a recording musician, and songs being played on radio, organizations that you had to belong to, like BMI and ASCAP, you know, and all this. So it wasn't just all listening to music. It was just, you know, the business of music. So I said to him, I said, you know, I'm in the studio now in the Cookhouse Recording Studios. I said, have you ever been in a recording studio before? And he goes like, no. I said, well, you're going to play with me. I said, we're going to go in the studio. And I was doing 5 songs at that time, Games, If You See Me, Better Than You Think, I'll Always Love You, and If We Don't were the 5 songs I was doing. And I just played rhythm guitar. And so I gave Prince copies of me playing and singing these songs. I said, okay, come up with some parts. Then I had my other band members, Wendell Thomas, Pierre Lewis, Dale Alexander, Christy Lazenberry, and Marcy Ingvoldstad, our resident Norwegian, was doing background singing and stuff. And they rehearsed for 2 weeks. We went into a recording studio, Cookhouse. I booked 4 hours, and we counted off 2, 3, 4, boom, and we just played next song, boom, next song, boom, all the way to 5 songs. We did 5 songs in 4 hours, and that was Prince's first ever time in a recording studio. And when we got the tapes to bring it home, me and the bass player, Wendell Thomas, he would call me up from St. Paul, and I lived in Minneapolis, South Minneapolis. He was saying to me, did you hear what Prince was playing? And I was going like, yeah, man. I said, how did he come up with that stuff? I mean, it was just amazing. You know, he played like a session player, you know, and it just blew my mind of what his guitar added to my songs. And then Prince calls me up, and he says, Pepe, I got to change something in the song. I was going like, what do you mean? I said, everything is perfect. It sounds good to me. He says, no, I made an error. I got to change something, you know. And at that time, and I promise you, I was going to go play golf the next day. I called the studio up, and I said, let Prince in the studio. He wants to do something. Whatever he wants to do, just let him do it. And I trusted this guy to do it. I mean, because of his great, you know, playing that he did on our session, I trusted him to go in the studio by himself, and I'm paying $100 an hour for him to go in the studio and change something on If You See Me. And so he went in there, he changed it, I was golfing, and everything was fine. But in those days, you know, other musicians would come into the studio and the board would change, you know, so it was impossible for him to get the same exact guitar sound, and you can hear it on the record, you know, if you hear If You See Me on the Cookhouse 5. And then later on, Prince covered that song, and he was going to put it out on one of his albums, but now it's in the vault, you know. And since the first time that Prince was in the studio with us, 94 East, those was the first 5 songs. We did 8 other songs after that, that Prince recorded, songs that I wrote. I wrote with Christy from 94 East, and then Prince and I wrote Just Another Sucker together, and him and Andre were they were my musicians. You know, we would go in the studio and we recorded Sound 80. Tony Sylvester from The Main Ingredient. So I took those tapes, those Cookhouse recording tapes, and I went to New York. And I stayed in New York for like 4 or 5 months. And the time that I was in New York, Prince met Owen Husney and Chris Moon, because he had got the bug then. You know, he wanted to work in studios and stuff. So when I came back and my band got signed with Polydor, and Bobby Z was our drummer then, because we had to get rid of Dale because he was always late. And then we hired Bobby, and then so Bobby was our drummer, and we all was signed with Polydor together. So when I came back to Minneapolis, Prince had said, I want you to meet some people. And I was going like, who? He says, Owen Husney, you know, and Owen had got him an apartment on Aldrich Avenue South, and I was there to make sure that Prince wasn't going to get screwed. That was my job, because he was my cousin, you know. And so I met Owen, and then I also worked with Hank Cosby, who wrote My Sharia Moore with Stevie Wonder and produced for Once in My Life, because he's the one that signed us at Polydor. And so we came here he came here from New York, and we went in Sound 80 to do our single. And when we were coming in, Prince was coming out with Owen doing his demo. And he looked at us and he goes like, what are you guys doing? I said, man, we getting ready to go, you know, do our single, man, because we were signed before those guys, before Prince was. And he goes like, well, can I play on it? I said, sure, man, come on, let's go. You know, and so he played on 1015, and Hank, that I wrote, and then Hank wrote a song for us called Fortune Teller, and Prince played guitar and did background vocals with Marcy and Christy. Owen he got him signed, so he was manager maybe a complete year, maybe a little over a year. But I was over Prince's house on 5215 France, and he needed something done. And to me, you know, now Owen was my friend at that time, and I still consider him my friend, but he wasn't doing a manager's job. And I knew what a manager was supposed to do, because I'm hanging around all the legends of rock and roll, baby, you know what I mean? And I knew. And he wasn't doing that manager type of work for him. Sure, he got him signed. I'm not taking anything away from him, anything like that. And I went to his office and I says, Owen, Prince needs this, he needs that, got to do this. And he said to me, I didn't like it, but what he said to me, he says, you know, well, why should I leave my job for someone who probably won't make it? Those was his exact words. I cannot make that up. He's mad at me because of that today. And I don't care, because I told him, I said, Owen, this is what I remember, and this was the truth. And I told him, I said, Owen, you're fired. I went back to Prince's house, and I didn't know I could legally fire him because he had paperwork with Prince. But I told him, I said, you're fired, man. I went back to Prince, I said, Owen's out. Prince says, okay. You know, I mean, you know, because Prince, I'm going to tell you, he listened to everything that I asked of him. He did everything that I asked of him. You know, he didn't question me. He knew that I knew what I knew, and what I was telling him was right. And I says, we're going to get you another manager. We got to get you a manager. So Warner Brothers was sending Prince to these radiothons and stuff like that, and they sent me tickets, you know, too, because they know that I was managing him at that time for 3 months. But I wasn't officially his manager, but I was with him for those times. And we did North Carolina and came back here, and then I said, I got to find him a manager. Now, through Little Anthony and the Imperials, again, Don Taylor used to manage Little Anthony and the Imperials. They brought him in from Jamaica when they played in Jamaica as a little kid, and was doing my job as a valet, hanging up the clothes, you know, taking their clothes to the cleaners, giving them towels so to sweat when they, you know, all this type of stuff. And he later became their manager. He learned how to become their manager. Then after that, he started managing Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, Bob Marley and the Wailers, okay? I called Don. I said, Don, got this kid, man. He signed with Warner Brothers, man, and he needs a manager. Don goes, well, how's his tax situation? I don't know where that came from. His tax situation? I said, I don't know, man. You know, so he sent us tickets. We flew to Miami, and Prince at that time had an $80,000 tour budget with Warner Brothers. And we met with Don. Don picked up the phone, called the president, Mo Austin, at that time, of Warner Brothers, and got his tour budget moved from $80,000 to $160,000 in a 5-minute phone call. I looked at Prince and I says, that's what a manager does. That's what a real manager does, you know. So now Prince is signed. He signed with Don for a while. When he was with Owen, he was practicing, rehearsing at Dale's Tire Mart. He got robbed. Either he left the door open or somebody broke in and robbed him. And I was pissed. I was so pissed. And I said, dude, you're going to come to my house. You're going to rehearse there. Ain't nobody coming to my house. You know, I'm from Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy, baby. You know, ain't nobody coming up in there. And so he started auditioning band members at our home in South Minneapolis. And all the equipment that he was ordering came to my house. And they rehearsed at our home from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night. And I mean, for 12 hours. And then, after everybody's gone, Prince went home and he still was practicing. I went over his house one evening to tell him something because I couldn't get him on the phone. And I said, I know he's home. And I drove over to his house. His car is sitting outside, and Datsun 310. He had got that from the money he got from Warner Brothers as an advance. And I'm ringing the bell, I'm knocking on the door, and he wouldn't answer. And you know, and I was going like, man. So I heard some tapping. I was going like, where is that coming from? I went around the side of the house, down in the basement. I looked through the window, and Prince is down there in the basement. I mean, practicing drums. After 12 hours of rehearsing with the band, I was going like, I was amazed. So I had to knock on the window in between the beats. You know, like he would go, boom, I go, you know, like that. Then he look up. Then he come in, you know, to the door, and I told him what I had to, you know, tell him and everything like that. And but, you know, and then as I told him what I had to tell him. I go back home. So they practiced at our home for like 6 months. The band that was practicing at my house was the Prince original band members: Andre Simone, Gayle Chapman, Dez Dickerson, Bobby Z, Prince. You know, those guys, they practiced. And we jammed with them after a while. You know, they would leave and Prince would still be there, and I'd be jamming with Prince a little bit and stuff like that. And it was so much fun. And then Warner Brothers wanted to see Prince perform because he wanted to go out on tour. They wanted to know if he was ready. So all the big wigs from LA come into Minneapolis. And the first concert that Prince did as a signed artist was at the Capri Theater. We produced that show. You know, Christy Lazenberry from 94 East made the tickets and stuff like that. I went to Naked Zoo and got lighting and got all of that stuff. We talked with the owner of the theater, and we did everything, you know, had the ticket prices, everything. And so when Warner Brothers came in, I hosted these guys to their seats, and Owen was there and everything like that. hosted them to their seats and stuff, and Prince went on stage and he started playing, the whole band. And they didn't think that Prince was ready to go on tour yet. And so Prince was not happy about that, and neither was I or any of the band members, you know. So he went back to the drawing board, and he found another rehearsal spot where he started rehearsing at, other than my home. And then the next thing you know, he's on tour. He started working out there. And then I did work with Owen Husney too, you know, going to Chicago, putting up posters, going to the record stores and stuff like that, and doing book covers and excuse me, all the Prince stuff and everything like that, you know. So, and I was with Prince for 11 years, and I never took a dime. I never took a dime. Now, all these other guys out there and stuff, you know, I credit them for doing what they did, but they got paid. I never took a dime. I didn't want a dime. I was looking out for his benefit, and I wanted him to be successful, you know. So when he passed, it was very devastating, you know, to me, because I thought that maybe I should have stayed with him. I was with him through Owen Husney, Don Taylor, Perry Jones, and Cavallo Ruffalo. So 4 managers I was with Prince, you know. And I felt, you know, I was just, it's like I lost my brother, you know. And I kind of felt responsible. I thought it was my fault because if I would have stayed with him, I knew that, you know, I could have helped him, you know, and he wouldn't have went down the road that he had went through, you know. Because when I left, and I know that he wanted me to still be there, but I couldn't. I couldn't do it anymore. I loved him, and I always respected him, and we did a lot of songs together. We had a lot of fun together. We played basketball. We talked about girls and stuff. We traveled to New York, back and forth with doing work for Tony Sylvester from the Main Ingredient. And but it was getting to a point where as I needed to define me. I had to find myself, you know. I knew that he was okay then. You know, he was strong enough to make it, and it's time for me to go. And he really wanted me to stay, but I had to go. You know, his management tried to get me to stay, and I had to go. But you know, me personally, I just want people to know the history of the Minneapolis Sound. I want them to know my input and the input of 94 East that we contributed to Prince and the Minneapolis Sound. There are so many other people out there who claim that, and you know, and they know me. This is what I want to say. They know me, they know us, they know what we did, but yet and still, they do not acknowledge what we did. And I know that if it wasn't for little Anthony and the Imperials who taught me, and then I taught Prince, none of this stuff would have happened. And I'm not for an ego trip for me, but just for the history of black music. You know, I mean, I'm not a racist or anything like that, but it happens so many times when you have a talented minority artist, and all of a sudden, all of these white folks come out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, I discovered him. I did this and I did that," you know, and they look at me and they go like, "Oh, you gave up your basement," and that's all that they think that I did. But I did more than that. You know, when Prince freaked out one day when we was on in North Carolina, he totally freaked out. And he told me, we got back to the hotel, and he says, "Pepe," he says, I said, "What's wrong, brother?" He says, "I feel like a piece of meat being carried around."